Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video. And to wrap up the Superman review marathon, and on the weekends, I think that for what I'm reviewing, I saved the best for last. And this being, the perfect way to close off the Superman review marathon entirely, and, this being the grand finale. You know what I'm saying. You know the drill. So that's right, guys. I knew that with this other documentary that does have to do with the Man of Steel, but more than just the character, the man who portrayed Superman, the Man of Steel himself. And for a lot of us, he's definitely the Superman. And how much of an impact this one man left off, not just portraying the man whom we believed could fly, but so much more that he left off, and with the struggles and such that he went through, what would happen to him in the 90s, and the foundation that he would start to help those out in the world who were paralyzed and such. Because, this documentary entirely, it's definitely something. It really is. The impact and just so much gut-wrenching moments that happen in this documentary. And the more that we learn about this one guy, of course, what we had known about him, from being, say, Superman, and what he went through, being paralyzed and such, and when it comes to documentaries, and I've said this before, there are more stuff that is said that some of us don't know about. But until we watch these documentaries, we learn so much more and So that's right, guys. To round off the Superman review marathon, and on the weekends, I am finally reviewing the documentary that's all about the man whom played Superman, and with what more he left off. Yes, that being Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. Yes. Once again, this documentary, how much of a huge impact it leaves off, and And I knew from the beginning, and I'm sure for a lot of us, that, this documentary, all about Christopher Reeve, was going to be excellent. And now that I had finally seen and watched it, and here I am now, reviewing it, and you're watching my review, I was not wrong, because, this is amazing. This is one heck of a documentary that's all about Christopher Reeve, and it goes into very good detail, with everything that happened in Christopher's life, and, how he started off, making his way into his acting career, and which, he would then find himself playing the titled character Superman, what else would come in his life, later on, and, what it would come to say family, and, well, of course, most infamously, his tragic accident that happened in 1995. Because I found myself really enjoying this documentary, and, of course, because I was feeling it. I definitely was on some of the, the good majority of stuff that, they get to you, and not once, while I was watching this documentary, did I shed a tear. Shed a tear. Because, I don't usually cry, over movies or documentaries. But at the same time, I was really feeling it. The power and impact that what is talked about in this documentary, and those that talk about Christopher Reeve and the tragic stuff that had happened to him from when he would be paralyzed to when he would sadly pass away, then when it would come to his, wife Dana, just, everything about this documentary is amazing. It really is. Knowing more about Christopher Reeve and what the man was like, the struggles he went through, and even, like, say, when it would come to his acting career, and those that he touched upon, and would have a huge influence and such, and, and when he started that foundation, helping those out in the world, and how much of an impact he put on those, and not to mention that, because there were a few times that Reeve found himself, having some controversial moments, like when it would come to his first love, or when, the foundation he began, some things that, were a bit controversial and such, and how people felt at first, but it managed to, die down, so, and thankfully it seemed as though it didn't last that long, But anyways, overall, the documentary, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, it's an excellent, well-put documentary, all about Christopher Reeve himself. Really good. Alright, so, with the first things I've had to say about the documentary out of the way, now, as always, for me, read the description / the story. Actor Christopher Reeve rises the stardom when he lands the role of Superman in the 1970s, when a horse riding accident leaves him paralyzed in 1995. Reeve spends the rest of his life searching for a cure for spinal cord injuries. Okay, so now with that out of the way, now let's dive in / break down the documentary itself. Yep. Well, because, first off, the documentary doesn't waste any time to already get into the part where, in 1995, Christopher Reeve had his, accident. When, because one thing that Reeve loved doing, he had a lot of things he loved doing in life before, he would be paralyzed. He would love going out sailing on a boat, and he would love skiing and doing all sorts of fun activities like tennis, tennis being one of them, and, just playing a few sports and such, and, tennis being one of them. And also, he was a pilot. He can fly planes and such, that being another one. And also, he would then love doing horse riding. So that was another biggie for Reeve that he loved doing. But what would happen in 1995? And again, it's literally one of the first things that's brought up. I mean, from that and also one of Christopher's sons, which being Will Reeve, Will Reeve being the son of Christopher and Dana Reeve. Will talking about, his early childhood and, because his cute and funny interactions with his dad most prominently, like knocking on the bathroom wall and then Christopher would knock back. But with the accident, because, some home videos that we would see at times of the Reeve family, and apparently, because, one of them being, say, them celebrating New Year's of 1995, and, hoping that 1995 would be an excellent year for them, but sadly, little did they know, and what would happen a little later that same year, because, with Reeve doing some horseback riding, and apparently out of nowhere, Reeve's horse put on its brakes, and Reeve just flying, and his foot got caught, and just, because that's where he would become paralyzed from the neck up, and, it's devastating for what would happen to poor Reeve. And with this breaking the news, and, because of this happening out of nowhere, Reeve's family being there by his side, and most prominently, his wife, and the information that was, given so far to the public and such, and that, apparently, because when they said and gave an update that Reeve, Reeve's body was lifeless and just, couldn't feel anything. And, for a while, Reeve after having that, because so much started to happen to Reeve, and when he regained consciousness and just having visions and, flashbacks of his life or something, and even like when he at one point considered maybe, he should commit suicide or something, and feeling that, he would be a burden to his family, and so much more. In fact, Christopher's own mother wanted her son to be, have the plug be pulled on her son because of the pain he was going through. However, Dana would not let this happen. Especially when, Reeve then began to become stronger again and not give up and fight. And especially when enter the late Robin Williams. Robin Williams paying a visit to his old buddy Christopher and cheering him up and making him laugh for the first time ever since he became paralyzed. And, and basically Williams showed to Reeve that life was going to be okay for him, and it would be different, but still, it was all going to be okay, and that his family was going to be okay with what he was like now. Just, it was great to see. So again, that's literally one of the first things that starts this documentary, and basically what happens in this documentary is that it goes back and forth from, like, say, when he was paralyzed to Reeve's early life of when he would begin acting and play Superman and such. Yeah, because, well, in Christopher's early days when he would begin acting and such, and he went to the Juilliard school, in the early 1970s, around 1973, and alongside with his roommate and buddy, Robin Williams, and other familiar faces that Reeve would cross paths with that going to Juilliard would be, say, the late William Hurt, as well as Jeff Daniels. Because they knew Reeves when they all went to Juilliard, and with Reeves studying and acting, and especially since one big influence on Reeve, and not to mention that he was a Juilliard faculty member. I think I might be mispronouncing that one word, but you know me sometimes. That being the late John Houseman. Yeah, John Houseman being responsible for helping Reeve get up there, especially at Juilliard. And then at some point, and to speed things up some, because, Reeve would find himself landing the role of this guy, on my shirt. And actually, apparently, William Hurt thought that this was probably not a good idea for Reeve, because Bill Hurt just, giving Reeves the heads up that, this being commercial and stuff like that. But Reeves, he was very serious on wanting to take this job and playing the title character, and even with mentioning that Marlon Brando is to be in Superman and he'll be playing the father of Superman. But, Reeve, he took that chance. Not intentionally, but just, ignoring with what Hurt had said and warned to Reeve. But Reeve taking it upon himself to accept the job, having done some auditions, and from there on, he would officially land the role of the Man of Steel himself. In fact, Reeve, when, mentioning and telling his dad that he had landed the part of Superman, and Christopher's father, being F.D. Reeve, like Franklin because F.D. for short, but Franklin Reeve. His father thought that, it was something else that went by the name Superman, not the comic book character, the hero. And apparently, because Christopher's father was not pleased. In fact, Christopher wanted to satisfy and please his father, but, sadly, didn't with Superman. And not to mention that, because when talking about Reeve's family, with Reeve's mother and father, because for it being complicated and a bit screwed up, although using the F-bomb, not the word screwed. Because, with Christopher's mother appearing in this documentary only via archive footage. Barbara Johnson, yeah, because apparently, yeah, and I didn't know about this. Reeve's parents, Barbara and Franklin, they were divorced, I think, like 3 times. They remarried 3 times, just golly. And, you know, Reeve didn't really have that much of a good childhood. And just how crazy, and with what the documentary explains about what his childhood was like and with his parents, jeez. And also, a member of the Reeve family on his mother's side, Kevin Johnson, making an appearance. Well, yeah, because he's Christopher's half-brother. Yeah, so as he's credited. And others that, yeah, make appearances in this documentary, and to go ahead and mention the rest of them, yeah, some of them, I will say. Susan Sarandon and Glenn Close, they had been friends with Christopher Reeve, and also Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg making an appearance in the documentary as well. And someone whom would be a big part of the foundation that Christopher started. Michael Manganiello, if I'm getting his last name right. Yeah, because being a friend of the family and then being a part of the foundation. Yep. And I already mentioned Jeff Daniels. Also, someone that would try and help Christopher with what he was going through, you know, starting in 1995, being the chief medical officer, the Kessler Institute, that being, the chief medical officer, Stephen Kirschblum. I think I might be pronouncing his last name right or wrong. I don't know. But, yeah, so with them and with what they have to say about Christopher and, you know, especially because with the chief medical officer, Stephen, when helping Christopher, because, again, the documentary going back and forth on talking about when he would be paralyzed and what he was doing in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. And, yeah, because coming back to when he would do Superman, because, yeah, well, because, you know, back then, people thought, and even Warner Brothers, they thought that the plans to do a Superman film was going to tank hard. Nobody thought that this was going to work, and seeing it as like a joke. But, you know, for Christopher, he definitely took this very seriously. He had good faith and courage in this movie, and with the character he was playing, taking it very seriously. And even, you know, the same would go for, say, Richard Donner, who does appear in the documentary, but only via archive footage. I guarantee you, if Donner had still been alive, he definitely would have been a part of this documentary, without a doubt. Perry Spangler, I hope I'm pronouncing his first name right, but yeah, whom was a producer of the first Superman film, actually appearing in the documentary with what he says about Christopher and when, yeah, development on Superman took place, and yeah, saying that people thought that, and Warner Brothers, that this was not going to work. It was not going to happen, but it for sure did. And again, as I said, from Donner and Christopher having, you know, great encouragement and faith that this was going to work, and when Donner, from day one, knew and believed that Christopher was going to pull it off. And he for sure did, because when working on the film, and when it would come to, say, the flying scenes, and, yeah, because, like, with Christopher having done those flying shots and, you know, the crew just being in silence for a few seconds, and then there would be applause and just, yeah, because that was a good sign right there, and yeah, what they were making was gonna work. And of course it did, yeah, because when Superman the movie made its way in 1978, because yeah, it changed the way we view superhero comic book movie adaptations, changing the face of the superhero genre. Yeah, literally. And of course, yeah, with the mentioning of Superman 2 in the works, and yeah, of course, Superman 2 being another success. Yeah. And besides, like, yeah, no mentioning of, like, say, when it would come to, say, Richard Donner being fired. Well, obviously, it wouldn't be mentioned, because, yeah, the focus is on Reeve, and, of course, with him as Superman. Okay, let's now talk about, say, when Reeves would cross paths with his first love, and that being Yes. The mother of his first two children, which, yes, yeah, here she is. Yeah, because I always have IMDb up, and just sometimes how they're listed. Okay, Gay Exton, I hope I'm getting her full name right, but just, yeah. She would be Reeve's first love interest, and how they crossed paths, and she herself being a part of this documentary. Well, because they first met while Reeve was working on the first Superman film. And the first time she encountered Reeve, she mistaken Reeve for the late Richard Kyle from one of the James Bond films, The Spy Who Loved Me. She thought it was Richard, but no, it was Christopher. And their first interactions, just, jeez, because, yeah, Reeve and her accidentally bumping into one another, and she fell on the floor. Reeve, instead of saying, I'm sorry, he said, hello, and just, yeah. And then a little later, Dick Donner properly introducing each of them to each other, and yeah, just from there on, they clicked, and yep, it was love at first sight. Yep. And didn't take too long for their relationship to be known to the public, and even after the completion of the first Superman film, and when they would start to have two kids. And yeah, because Christopher Reeve's first two kids, who, yeah, are most prominently in this documentary, Matthew and Alexandra. Yep, because their presence in the documentary, their earliest experiences with their father, and what their childhoods were like, and just, yeah. It's amazing, because, yeah, the love that Reeve and his first partner had, seemed pretty good. But also, apparently, yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, some controversy that would make its way to Reeve, where apparently there was some controversy towards Reeve and his first love, where, they weren't married. And, people asking Reeve about that, in some news interviews and something like that, just, yeah. But with what, Reeve and her, Exton specifically say about this, and with the whole thing of marriage, I get each of their point. I think it's understandable. If they had ever decided to marry, well, that would be up to each of them. Yeah. But it seemed like, for them, they were totally okay and comfortable where they were at, not being married and just being two simple lovebirds. Just, yeah, you get my point. Okay, but coming back to, say, with Reeve and his acting career, because, yeah, outside of Superman, doing the Superman films, and what Reeve would be doing next, and what, something else with his acting career, because, well, even when it would come to, say, Superman 3, because, yeah, Reeve's heart wasn't in it when it came to 3, and, not making much of a good success of his acting career besides doing the Superman films, but, at the same time, he had a few successful films he was in, it is mentioned, Somewhere in Time, that being a biggie besides Superman for Reeve, but just, yeah, with what the documentary explains and talks about with, his acting career and what would come next, just, yeah, not all that good. And even when, say, Reeve and his first love would then start to drift apart, and things just not working out for them in the end. And, Reeve, did spend a little bit of time to himself in America and to see what it was like, the single life, but just, yeah, in the end, and when he came back to England, it just, sadly, wasn't going to work out for both of them, especially for Reeve. And this put quite a huge impact on his first partner, because, Gay was very upset by this, that her and Reeve were no longer a thing, and with what, Matthew and Alexandra had to say about that. Yeah. But yeah, sometime later in the mid/late 80s, Reeve eventually would find someone new, and yeah, and to go ahead and mention that, because yeah, entered the late Dana Reeve, because when the two of them would first cross paths, well, Dana Reeve being a really good singer, and Reeve actually, seeing Dana perform and singing, and it didn't take too long for them to connect right away and have their first date, and yeah, just love instantly right there for both of them, definitely. And yeah, because with what's talked about between each of them, how much they connected, and they were definitely meant for each other, they were the perfect couple, and with what, the documentary says and describes about Dana and how much of an incredible woman she was, and when she would cross paths with Reeve, and when very later on they would have their first child together, and their only child, which of course being Will. And, when, say, Christopher's first two kids, Alexandra and Matthew, whenever they would, go on vacation and spend some time with their father, and the first time they would meet Dana, because yeah, it didn't take too long for Alexandra and Matthew to really connect and just love Dana. And Dana, apparently, according to Gay, because Dana wrote a letter to her saying that hers and Reeve's two kids were amazing, and Dana not wanting to become a stepmother to them, but more of a friend to them, a really good friend. And, Gay Eakston was very delighted by this, and writing back to Dana, thanking her and such, just, yeah. And obviously, because, yeah, things would turn out pretty good, the relationship between, Gay Eakston and Christopher Reeve, getting along pretty well. And obviously, yeah, the same would go for both her and Dana. So, yeah, in fact, because, Gay Eakston still being very close with Reeve, and, all of them still being a family, and that's good to see. And like I said, because yeah, from the documentary going back and forth on, Christopher Reeve's life, and then when he would be paralyzed, because yeah, more on him being paralyzed and the aftermath of being paralyzed, because yeah, Reeve was determined to, be able to walk again, getting some rehab and, trying to get his body parts to move, and it's very devastating that, only Reeve able to move his head some, but the rest of his body, none, because not even able to feel anything, especially the warmth and touch of Dana. And the fact, because Reeve's stating this, that all the things that he would never be able to do, and what he loved doing, from all the sports and activities that he did, from skiing, sailing out in the ocean, horse riding, making love to Dana, all this stuff, just, yeah, not able to do any of that. Yeah, it's understandable and devastating. But again, he managed to pull through, and not resting and determined to try to get himself back walking again. And also, just 1 year after he would be paralyzed, he actually was asked, and you know this, where he was approached and asked to make an appearance at the Academy Awards in 1996 and make this speech, and Reeve and the others, especially Reeve, wasn't really sure how this was going to go for him, and Reeve thinking that he might, pass out or something would happen to him when being out there in front of everybody. But when he made his appearance and out on stage at the Academy Awards in 1996, well, it was something so memorable for Reeve. And of course, yeah, everybody giving a standing ovation to Christopher, a very moving moment, and the speech that he gives, and throwing in some humor. Yeah, nice on Reeve. And yeah, more people that Reeve would meet, like I think, yeah, because at the Academy Awards, meeting these chefs and cooks, and yeah, even like, how much they love him and referring to him as Superman, just, yeah. And also because, yeah, the more talk that is said about the character of Superman, that, even though Superman is fictional, he's make-believe, there's still something about the character and what Reeve left off on portraying that character, and with what is said specifically in the documentary. Yeah, understandable, and yeah, makes sense. But yeah, and just like, and just again, like the the journey that Reeve would take trying to heal up again and to hopefully once again be able to move and walk again. Just, yeah. And even when Reeve would start to want to help out others out there in the world that, you know, are going through the same thing that he goes through. Yeah, being paralyzed and, you know, in chairs. And wanting to help people to walk again. And that's another thing because, yeah, another controversial thing that would come into Reeve's way would be, yeah, with what he wanted to do and because of, you know, the thing of helping those to walk again. And even what Dana told Reeve about this, that, you know, some people may prefer not wanting to walk again and such, you know, and with what she specifically said. And even like, yeah, because this one commercial that has Reeve, you know, walking again, you know, because his head being digitally placed in this, you know, with this body where it looks like he's walking again, and just, yeah, very interesting. But, you know, with what the documentary says about all that, well, thankfully, at some point, of course, it did die down, but just, yeah. But overall, when it came to the Reeve and Dana Foundation and what that would be like for them, and Reeve just, again, reaching to those out there with what they're going through, and also, one of them most prominently, whom would cross paths and be friends with Christopher Reeve and the family, and, you know, disability advocate. I'm having trouble pronouncing that word, but you know what I'm trying to say. That being the late Brooke Ellison, which I didn't quite realize this, that, yeah, now she appears in this documentary, but, yeah, after appearing in this documentary, yeah, she would sadly pass away, and the documentary being dedicated to her. That's nice to see. So, with Brooke Ellison, what she says about Christopher Reeve, and when her and Reeve would cross paths, yeah, because definitely an amazing moment for both of them. And not to mention that, well, with Brooke Ellison, yeah, Reeve, because he didn't give up, well, he would then find himself in the directing business, actually managing to find himself to get back into work, despite him being paralyzed and in a chair. Because, yeah, in fact, because he was paralyzed, and it required 48 hours of care for him, and at some point, like, yeah, Reeve and Dana were going to have to find some way to get the money made and just, yeah, how can they support themselves and so on. But, yeah, just, they somehow managed to find out and work this out. And again, when Reeve would find himself back into work, doing some acting, some more, but also being in the director's chair, in fact, because having directed this one movie that stars Glenn Close and Whoopi Goldberg, and you know what that is. And when, yeah, sometime later, Christopher Reeve would be in charge of working on this film that's a biopic all about Brooke Ellison, if anybody knows about that film. So that's really cool. Also, to name those that appear, you know, in this documentary only through via archive footage, like Marlon Brando, Michael Caine, Bill Clinton, Neil Diamond, Harrison Ford, Gene Hackman, Mark Hamill, Caitlyn Jenner, Margot Kidder, and I mentioned Richard Kyle, Barack Obama, David Prowse, because, yeah, David Prowse, whom was the body performance of Darth Vader, he was responsible. The documentary states, and, yeah, with what Christopher Reeve says, Prowse was responsible for training and helping Reeve be built up and such for the role of Superman. So, yeah, that's nice to see. Also, Robert Redford and Wendy Riger, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and George Bush, Jimmy Carter. And, yeah, because it's mentioned that those that were the potential actors to be Superman, you know, potential Supermans were, like, say, Robert Redford, Arnold Schwarzenegger, even, say, Clint Eastwood and Paul Newman, even though those two aren't mentioned still. And, yeah, because also the fact that Reeve would cross paths with, you know, like, say, some of the presidents, including, say, Queen Elizabeth II, and, yeah, and them peering through via archive footage, just, yeah, it's amazing. All the people that Reeve would cross paths with, yeah. But yeah, and also, yeah, because more on Christopher's acting, because, you know, Reeve wanting to show to the audience, the world, that he can do more than just being Superman. In fact, you know, another biggie for Reeve was him performing on stage, Broadway, and so on. And one that he was a part of where he starred alongside with, you know, I believe, yeah, because it was Jeff Daniels, yeah, where, yeah, either Jeff Daniels or William Hurt, you know, playing, like, gay lovers and such, and seeing Christopher Reeve kiss a man on this Broadway show, and apparently because some people shouting out, you know, Superman, say it isn't so, but again, and as I just said, Reeve wanting to show to the people that he can be a really phenomenal actor than just be known as Superman. Yeah, and I would think so, because, yeah, because knowing the other films that Reeve has been in, and he's had a few successors, like, again, most prominently, you know, Romance in Time. That was another biggie for Reeve besides Superman. Just, yeah. But, you know, despite that, you know, Reeve still having some love and appreciation for him being known as Superman, being the definitive Superman on the big screen, just, yeah. And not to mention that, yeah, because, you know, more on him being paralyzed, because the fact that even after he was paralyzed, he received numerous of fan letters, even some fan letters, like, yeah, letters from celebrities, like, say, Richard Dreyfuss and Robert De Niro. That's pretty cool. Just, yeah, it's just amazing. Okay, and, well, because, what to talk about next? Well, because, yeah. Well, still, because, you know, with Reeve's journey, you know, trying to find a cure for those that have the same thing that he does, being paralyzed and such. Also, not to mention, there is a lot of times, we would cut to seeing, like, outer space and seeing this statue figure that resembles Christopher Reeve, and throughout this, and when cutting back to the statue, we would see the statue of Christopher Reeve being, you know, completely covered in kryptonite, and basically showing that as the documentary proceeds, that, yeah, Reeve's condition getting worse and worse. That's a nice attention to detail right there, and the direction that the documentary takes with that. You know what I mean? But yeah, also, because, yeah, well, yeah, and just coming back, and also coming back to the family and relationships, you know, that Reeve had. Yeah, I mean, just overall, because despite the ups and downs, it all turned out pretty good, you know? And even after Reeve was paralyzed, in fact, because, you know, the fact that Reeve, it's mentioned where, by Will, the fact that his father managed to teach him how to ride a bike, it's amazing, yeah. And, well, Will managing to learn how to ride a bike, that's great. And some things that Reeve was able to do, you know, being paralyzed, it's amazing, yeah. Being a great father, and Dana, you know, just being a great, fantastic woman, you know, a great partner and wife to Reeve, and at the same time, you know, looking after their son, and also, yeah, Matthew and Alexandra, and even when, like, say, not long after Reeve was paralyzed, and when Will's birthday came up, Dana throwing a birthday party for their son, and trying to protect and keep, you know, Will occupied and in a happy mood and such, because with what all had just happened, yeah, that's very understandable and very important. And also, because, yeah, well, just still, speed things up some, because, yeah, you know, still with Reeve, like, you know, trying to find a cure, but also, to go ahead and mention this, at some point, and, yeah, like, around the early 2000s, Reeve, surprisingly, was starting to get some movement from his fingers and a little bit of his legs. In fact, yeah, it soon went underway for him to try to get his body to move again, like being in this pool where his legs started to move some, and again, with his fingers, just, yeah, it seemed like there was going to be hope that maybe soon, possibly, however this was going to go, that Christopher was going to be able to walk again. But of course, as we all know, that's not what would happen, unfortunately. Yeah. Okay, so let's come back to Robin Williams some more, because because after Reeve was paralyzed, Williams and his wife at the time, Marcia, they were very helpful and supportive of, Reeve and his family. And, even when, the day of the anniversary, when Reeve would be paralyzed, throwing a party and such, and with what Williams and Marcia specifically did in hiring a chef, Williams being a very great friend and almost a brother to Reeve. In fact, because, they were almost like brothers. And also, this was brought up where, something humorous, because with what's described, that Williams and Reeve, both of them walking out on the streets, and, the people keeping it together just pointing out, and, it's Superman, and Williams sharing this, that, it's Superman and Popeye. Yeah, I mean, it's true, because, around that time, Reeve and Williams would launch their acting careers, with, Reeve being Superman and Robin Williams as Popeye. Although, technically, not a success for Williams as Popeye, but had it not been for Popeye, well, look where Robin would go to next, big-time movie career, But anyways, so the rest of the stuff that's brought up about Williams and after Reeve was paralyzed is really great and very touching. Also because, and to mention some of the other people, in this documentary, because, I know I didn't name all of them, because, only two more, because, John Kerry, whom is a politician and a friend of Reeve and the family, and also Christopher's assistant, Lori Hawkins, with her presence in the documentary, and with what she says at times about Reeve and the family. And as I said earlier, where Reeve seemed as though that, he was going to maybe hopefully start to move again, because with him starting to move some with his fingers and his legs, and those helping him to, move his legs some, take it very easy, And the rest of the years that, Reeve would have with his family, and, to go ahead and bring this up now, because, unfortunately, and everybody knew, it seemed like we all knew that it was going to happen one day, and I'm sure Reeve would know this too, and it for sure would, where, just one simple evening, Reeve and his son Will and the others watching a baseball game, and, after the ball game was finished that evening, and, after midnight, according to Will, the nurse looking after Christopher, slammed Will's bedroom door open and alerting Will that something was wrong with his father, and apparently he fell into a coma. And with them being sent to the hospital, and Dana was not present at the house, but she was determined to make her way there, and Alexandra, Reeve's daughter, being there as well at the hospital, Matthew was behind, he was making his way to the hospital, and apparently because with them trying to, fix up Christopher, he apparently died on and off a few times. And when Dana finally showed up, because she rushed, and Alexandra remembered that Dana was shouting to Reeve, I love you, just to get Reeve to still be alive and to hear her voice. And even for Dana, because, she vowed, even before Reeve would be paralyzed, that she would love and care for Reeve with all her heart. And even after he would be paralyzed, always being there by his side, no matter what, and, would, agree to his life decisions, his choices, and so on. Just, that's such a great woman right there. Yeah. And, unfortunately, because Reeve did sadly die. Yep. and no longer being in pain. Finally having the rest in peace he well deserved. And unfortunately, because, yeah, I mean, Matthew, he didn't make it in time, didn't get to be there when his father was still alive, and receiving a phone call that, yeah, that Christopher had died. Very sad, definitely. And yeah, because what would happen next? I mean, you know, with Christopher Reeve's funeral happening, and most prominently, a bit of footage of, say, each Robin Williams and Dana Reeve, what they say about Christopher. Robin especially, considering him a brother, and, you know, throwing in a bit of humor, because, you know, when it comes to funerals, you gotta have some humor and stuff like that, right? So, yeah. But at the same time, yeah, it's obvious that Robin, you know, he was trying to keep it together. Yeah. Even Glenn Close commenting, and yeah, I think she makes a good point, where if Reeve had still been alive, then Williams would be as well. And yeah, because it's also mentioned that, you know, both Reeve and Williams sharing, well, obviously a lot in common, especially the fact that each of them going through darkness. Yeah, and if you know, with Williams going through darkness and his battles, oh yeah, that especially hits hard. And with this documentary. And when it would come to Dana Reeve, with what she says at her husband's funeral, just breaking down, and, you know, when they first got married, and the wedding vows that she had, and promising that she would love and care for him, just, oh, yeah. And life after Christopher's passing, for Dana and Will, well, I mean, it did seem to go pretty well. It was different, but yeah, managing to pull through. However, yeah, it's obvious that, you know, this was going to be brought up, where not long after the passing of Christopher Reeve, well, something started to happen and affect Dana. Because, well, yeah, her life, you know, not being the same, and a part of her dead after, you know, her lover being gone and such. But when she was approached to sing at some concert, well, something happened where she coughed, and just, yeah, it was not normal. And even with Christopher's assistant talking about this, that, yeah, Dana being checked at the hospital with what this was, and apparently, you know, she had been diagnosed with lung cancer. And the fact that all throughout her entire life, not once did she smoke. And for it to happen, like, I'd say that's probably a very rare thing for someone to have lung cancer who never in his or her life had smoked a single cigarette or cigar. Yeah. But yeah, just happened out of nowhere. And throughout 2005, you know, Dana doing the best she could to look after hers and Reeve's son, and yeah, still keeping the foundation alive and going, her being in charge, and yeah, eventually it was just getting worse and worse for poor Dana, and eventually checking herself in the hospital, those being with her, and unfortunately, in 2006, she would sadly die. And of course, it was another huge effect on the family, even for Will, because, you know, on the day that his mom died, because he felt from there on alone. But, you know, at the same time, he had never been alone, because he had always has his two siblings. Yeah, you know, Alexandra and Matthew. In fact, it was brought up earlier in the documentary where Will brought up that Matthew especially helped look after and raise young Will as like a brother and a father. So, yeah. And not to mention, the three of them, Alexandra, Matthew, and Will, they would continue on what their parents, especially their father, had started with the foundation. And after Dana's passing, the name would then be changed, and from there on be named the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. Just, yeah. And the last stuff that's brought up in the documentary, all of those that are part of the documentary, and what more they have left off to say about Christopher and Dana, just, yeah. just very heart-touching and so on, just, yeah. And, you know, the last bit of, like, audio, you know, recordings we hear of Christopher Reeve and talking about Superman, just, yeah. Just what more do I really have to say? Just, yeah, this documentary itself, it's excellent. It really is. Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, a well-put documentary all about Christopher Reeve. It's definitely one of those top documentaries that really hits you. Definitely. Everything about it from beginning to end, with whom was involved, stuff, for some of us, we didn't know that much of about Christopher and his family. And what it would come to say, talking about him as Superman, his acting career, life outside of acting, and with his family and relationships, and when he would be paralyzed, creating his foundation, trying to find a cure, and a few things that would, you know, bump in his way, you know, some bumps in the roads, a few controversies, and that are talked about in this documentary. His, you know, friendship and, you know, brotherly relationship, I guess you could say, with him and Robin Williams. Yeah. And, you know, again, just, you know, with Reeve's kids being a part of this documentary and those that knew Reeve very closely, and just, yeah, overall, this documentary, Superman, the Christopher Reeve documentary, an excellent documentary. What more do I have to say? Yeah. And I'm giving Superman, the Christopher Reeve documentary, well, is it obvious? Yeah. 10 out of 10 stars. Yes, 10 out of 10 stars for Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. And what about you guys? What did you think of the documentary itself? All about Christopher Reeve, his life of acting when he was paralyzed, his family, his relationships, his friendship and brotherly love with Robin Williams, all of those he had a huge impact on, that, you know, he would impact on those, and trying to find a cure, trying to, you know, find a way to get himself to walk and move again, all that was talked about in this documentary. And, you know, just those of us that didn't know that much about Christopher, and, you know, with all that's talked about, because, yeah, of course we have known that he has been Superman, and also when he was paralyzed, but there was more to it that we really had no full knowledge of. Yeah. Just, yeah, again, what do you think of the documentary itself, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, and with what I've had to say, my review, and yeah, what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward, and I will see you guys in the next video / review. And with all that, the Superman review marathon has officially come to a close. Yes. And of course, also on the weekends, because, yeah, like I said, you know, this being the grand finale of the Superman review marathon, and I think, yeah, this was very fitting that this be the last. And yeah, it's been fun with the Superman review marathon that I have done on the weekdays and on the weekends. And just, yeah, what more do I have to say? I had a great time, and I'm sure you guys had a great time with this review marathon all about Superman. Yep. So, yeah, again, thank you very much for watching. Take care, and peace out.